Good morning. Welcome back to the Retirement Report. I'm Hank Parrott, your host. With me, my good friend, special guest, Russ Cook with Russ Cook and Associates over in Brentwood, Tennessee. Russ is a board-certified estate planning attorney. I've been working with Russ with my clients now for over 15 years, and I can tell you that one of the areas that's been very beneficial, because sometimes we have clients that Russ and I have worked with where, brought him in, we've literally had to go to someone's home where they're, already terminal. I mean, they're, in some instances, it's like they're short for this world, and they've waited that long, but we get the planning done. So the point of that, and what it means to you, is this. I've seen the work Russ does on the other end when we're actually administering the estate, when we're, helping the family then after someone's passed, and making sure that all that planning now is coming to fruition, and we're seeing that it does just exactly what is intended to do. And it's so important because, Russ, you've probably got stories where someone's come in where they didn't have good estate planning done, and you're trying to fix maybe a problem that was there, that was created from the poor planning.
Yeah, you have to really be careful about this type of planning. I know it's interesting to talk, it's hard to talk about because most folks don't know if their plan's good or not until they pass away, and then they pass away and they're dead. And but it's what you're leaving your family, that's how you have to really look at it. And is this something, whatever you have in place, is that what's going to help the family whenever you because you don't want to add stress and anxiety and problems to already a very emotional situation when you're gone. And we've had to go to court and get the judge involved in reinterpreting documents because they were done poorly, or they were missing things, or in a lot of cases the documents didn't say what everyone said the person wanted them to say, because for whatever reason there was not a review before they signed it, or if they prepared it themselves they said different things, or they used the wrong terms. I mean, to give you a specific example, I had a client, well, it wasn't my client, we had a case where we were probating a will where the person said, I don't want any monies to go to these family members. Well, we know that she meant, I don't want any assets going to these family members, but everyone interpreted monies literally, meaning those family members got all her real estate. And so she was probably rolling over in her grave, but that was what we were stuck with, trying to fix a problem that could have been avoided if she had the planning reviewed and properly prepared.
This is one of those areas when working with my clients. So an example would be, we go through, we're setting up the financial plan, we're getting their retirement plan in place, what the income planning, the tax planning, we're dealing with all these different areas, and we get to the estate planning piece. Now we're going to bring Russ in, and Russ is going to sit in my conference room. We'll meet together. We'll go over with our clients there the different options for them with estate planning. Now, I've usually already had a conversation with them, walked them through some of the different ins and outs and pros and cons of different options they might elect, talk to them about what their goals and what they'd like to accomplish with regard to their estate planning before Russ comes in. Then we fill Russ in, Russ comes into it, and he goes through a more detailed and expressing to them what the different options for planning are and what the pros and cons are, and back and forth with questions until we arrive at a plan. Then he'll give them an opportunity, if they would like to hire him to do that, he'll have them sign off on a letter, and he can do this work for you. Now, when we get to the next stage where now Russ has got their documents together, we meet at Russ's office and we're going through, and this is what I want you to take from this, is that Russ goes through these documents in detail with the client. So we have meetings, and typically it's at least 2 meetings just on estate planning, one with me, one with Russ and I, and then when Russ has got the documents ready, this meeting is where he's going to go then in detail and make sure that what has been communicated is what's on paper, and that communication is clear. And when we're doing estate planning, one of the things is, you're like, I've had people say, not only do I not know the answers, I'm not even sure what questions to ask, right? We help you with that too. When you say, here are your options, here are your, the choices you get to make. and it will show you what the outcome of these different options would look like in your particular situation. So that it makes it easier for you to make that choice, right? To make that decision when you know what the outcome is going to be, and you compare outcomes and you choose the one that you most want. That's what good estate planning and good planning in general is all about. And so when Russ sits in his office at that document signing, he's going through that, all right, section by section, and making sure that this is what you wanted, right? And giving you the opportunity, if any changes need to be made, he can make them there on the spot. That's what good estate planning is about. It's making sure you're going to get what you want, and that in fact you're being shown all the different options available to you, what the pros and cons of them are, to make it easier for you to get the plan that you want. So when it comes to that kind of planning, and in fact we talk about estate planning mistakes to avoid. Let me get this slide up and kind of walk through that. Estate planning mistakes to avoid. One we talked about already, right? Having no plan at all. Second, unintentionally disinheriting heirs. We talked about that, right? With joint ownership. Incorrect beneficiary designations. This is another. So after we meet at Russ's office and he goes through all that and we get all those documents done, the next piece is what we call funding the trust, all right? And in that situation, what we're looking at is now we've got to make sure that those assets, okay, are now in the name of the trust. Russ is going to take care of any real estate assets. He'll do up the deeds necessary to make sure that that goes well. But then making sure that certain accounts are in the trust name, or that the trust may be listed as beneficiary. The other parts, that's what we do back at my office again. And this is another area. Incorrect beneficiary designations is one of the big ones that can really hurt you when it comes to planning. Okay, and making sure that, and think of it, your 401ks, your IRAs, you know, retirement accounts, insurance policies, annuities, whatever it might be, those beneficiary designations are going to dictate what happens to that asset, not all the estate planning you've done. So if they're not coordinated, it can, and this is what we were just talking about earlier, I could, you know, if you're a financial advisor and estate planning attorney aren't on the same page and aren't working together, it can create some problems. All right, it can create some additional expense for you. It can cause you to disinherit heirs. It can create additional taxes where they could have been avoided or minimized. So there's a lot there that needs to be done and coordinated. Marilena, did you see the one on estate planning mistakes to avoid? And on that, failure to protect your assets. And we've been talking a little bit about protecting assets from creditors and the community property trust. Talk a little bit about some of the benefits. Well, there we go. So on the community property trust was one of those. Failing to protect your assets from creditors. I like that. Creditors, predators, bankruptcy, divorce, family issues, etc. Let's stop on that one. So when it comes to community property trusts, and there's some asset, and trusts in general, you can get some asset protection features.
Yeah, all the estate planning documents that we prepare, we always go through the what-if stage of making sure everything's going in the direction you want. And one of the what-if stages is, what if someone inherits from your estate and they end up, let's say they're married and they end up getting divorced? Are those assets they inherit going to be subject to a divorce proceeding? What if they have to file bankruptcy after they inherit assets? Or what if they just have creditors in general that start going after their assets? These are problems that people are seeing as real problems when they're transferring assets down to a beneficiary. And we can solve that problem by not necessarily giving an inheritance direct to a beneficiary, but instead having that inheritance go into a trust. Now, this is different from a revocable trust.
We can go ahead and get rid of that slide. In fact, this is one of those areas, Russ, when you're talking about because when we say revocable trust, which is kind of an umbrella, when you're usually doing up a trust, there are kind of other trusts that are in there. Yeah, there's what are called testamentary trusts. Those are trusts that are created at death. So the revocable trust is one that's created during your life to help manage assets and distribute those assets outside of a probate proceeding. But then inside the revocable trust agreement, or if you have a will, inside the provisions of the will, there'll be what are called testamentary trusts that are created to receive assets
that normally would go directly to a beneficiary. So to give you an example, in Tennessee, you can instead, let's say husband dies first, he wants his assets to go to his wife, but she may remarry and there may be problems, you know, with the new spouse coming in and getting those assets. So what a lot of folks will do is they'll have an estate plan where instead of the assets going directly to the surviving spouse, they go in trust with the surviving spouse as the trustee and beneficiary, so that during the surviving spouse's lifetime, we have a protective wrapper around those assets that cannot be pierced by any third party. And then we take that same idea and apply it at the survivor's death when we're setting up inheritance for the kids. So instead of the kids getting their inheritance outright, we have their inheritance go into trust with each child as trustee and beneficiary. And again, as beneficiary and trustee, they have full access and control of the assets, but the third-party creditor or ex-spouse has no claim to those assets because they're in trust, they're not in the child's name. Same with the spouse, they're in trust, they're not in the spouse's name. So that's been proven to be a very good tool in estate planning that's not just for the super wealthy. I mean, it's really something that everyone should consider.
This is one of, you know, we talk about, and in my book, 7 Steps to Financial Freedom in Retirement, I get into estate planning. We talk about the 5 essential documents. So that would be the revocable living trust, a pour-over will, power of attorney for assets, power of attorney for health care, and a living will. What you're looking to do in the type of planning that Russ was just talking about is taking now this part of, first you're going to make sure that your stuff is going to go to who you want, when you want, and in the manner that you want. But the next piece, as I said, is the asset protection. So this can be good for a surviving spouse, but it can, and also, of course, for children. So one of the most common things that we see, unfortunately, in our society is that of divorce. So one of the big ones then, if you're leaving monies to your children and you want it to stay in your bloodline, going from children to grandchildren and so on, you know, if that in-law becomes an outlaw, we don't want them walking away, right, with our money that we're leaving and wanting in our bloodline, not going out with them and down, you know, their bloodline. So this is part of this protection that you get with good estate planning as well. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, we'll dive into that a little bit more and a little more in depth and give you an opportunity again, if you'd like to get this type of planning for yourself and have a personalized plan review, we can help you with that. But first, we'll take a break. Join us here. We'll be right back on the Retirement Report.